Welcome back, YouTube. It's Casual Card Games. I might switch it back to Casual Commander because I thought I was going to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! And now I'm like, I don't really care. So, sorry if I flip up. I might just keep it the same just to keep that door open as a possibility. But anyway, welcome back. Finally coming at it's been like a month and a half, maybe 2 months since I did my last deck profile. Uh, this is a deck that I was waiting for the last couple cards to come in. Finally picked it up. The last card needed. So this is my Kozilek, the Great Distortion EDH deck. This is a deck that I had built prior to this last year when I kind of sold my stuff. And anyway, now I'm back in, and it's a really fun deck. I love colorless. I mean, this is my only monocolor deck that I have at the moment. I had a mono red deck, which now I've turned into Rakdos, which that deck, I should be able to give you guys that deck profile here, I would say in the next like week or 2 weeks. I should have all the cards for it. But anyway, so this is, yeah, my colorless deck. For anyone that doesn't know, Kozilek, the Great Distortion. He's a 10 mana legendary creature, Eldrazi, 12/12. When you cast him, if you have fewer than 7 cards in your hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So even if they counter Kozilek, the Great Distortion, you still get that effect. And then he has Menace, and then you can discard a card with converted mana cost X, counter target spell with converted mana cost X. So, really cool. I love I mean, I don't play a ton of decks that run counters. I have one deck, my Newmont, the Devastator deck, that runs a lot of counter spells. But this deck, like every card in your hand becomes a counter spell pretty much. So, I mean, depending on what the CMC is, but I really think it's a cool card. I don't know. I saw Ashlyn Rose from the Game Nights channel, Command Zone. Uh, she played this like a couple years ago. I want to say like 2018. And once I saw that episode, I was like, man, that looks like a lot of fun. I'd love to play that. So, with this deck, so I have some certain preferences of cards that I like or don't like, or certain things. But I will take suggestions. There's a few cards here that I'm kind of iffy on of whether I want to keep. So basically, if you guys want to comment down below and give me a few suggestions of cards, like I said, most likely I'll probably already I'm aware of that card that you mentioned. I'll be like, oh, there's a reason why I'm not running it because I don't like it or it's too strong, whatever. But I don't know. I mean, you guys could mention some colorless card that I've never heard of before, and then I'm like, oh wow. I will say one of the only cards in here that I know I'm not running that I maybe would like to run if the price was different was uh oh, why can't I think of it? Big Tentacle Eldrazi. Oh, Emrakul. The obviously one of them's banned, and then there's an Emrakul that's not banned that lets you take. I think it lets you take an opponent's turn for them. Basically, that's not a very fun gameplay scenario. It's not like if that card was $5, I'd throw it in here, but because it's like 45, $50, I'm like, it doesn't do. It's not me having a whole lot of fun with it. It's just kind of being like kind of cruel. So anyway, okay, let's get to it. The lands you could run. There's a lot of like colorless non-basic lands that do some cool stuff. I just run 38 wastes, 19 of each art style. I don't like full art, so I like mine to be traditional. So I had to pay a little bit extra to get these, but I'm really happy with them. So yeah, I think for a monocolor deck, like me, people might say 38's a little too much. I'd rather have too many lands than not enough. I just don't like the scenario of me having to do mulligans over and over again to find the lands. Okay, so we run 30 creatures, so let's do the creatures. So we're gonna do low CMC first, then go to the high stuff. Crashing drawbridge, a 0/4 with defender. That's not the reason we play it. The main reason is it's tapped to give our creatures haste. Unless you guys have another card that I'm not aware of, this is one of the only colorless cards that can give your stuff haste. So, like that. Eldrazi Mimic. It can basically, if another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can make Eldrazi Mimic's base power and toughness become that creature's. Well, obviously, we play some high power stuff, including our own commanders. So, like, if you drop your commander in after, like, this is already on the field, this thing will become a 12/12 until on a turn. So, that's pretty cool. Walking Atlas. This is, I think, the last printing before they decided to, like, because this is an artifact. So even though it doesn't say artifact creature, this is an artifact. But yeah, you can tap it, put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do get loaded up with too many lands, because we do have a few cards in here that let us draw a lot, so it's kind of cool that that's a way to dump lands out of your hand. Burnished Heart. I don't think Burnished Heart is a good card in any other scenario, any other deck, but in this deck, we only have so many ways to ramp, and if we have to pay 3 one turn, then pay 3 another turn to ramp by 2 basic lands, I'll take it. Foundry Inspector. So we run 27 artifacts that aren't creatures, and then I didn't do the exact count, but I will say roughly 10 to 12 of these creatures in this deck are artifacts. So being able to reduce all your artifacts by 1 with this guy, that's going to put in a lot of work. Scrap Trawler. So with Kozilek, you want hand resources. You want cards in your hand to be able to discard to counter stuff. So with this, with Scrap Trawler, there's a few cards in here that allow us to sacrifice artifacts. So with this, once that artifact goes to the graveyard, you can grab something with lesser CMC. So I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time, but it's just kind of a cool little trick that you can do to try to get some of your resources back. Scare Tiller. So this is a way, once again, for us to get lands either back from our graveyard, which most likely isn't going to be the case, or put lands from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. So Scare Tiller's nice. He only does that when he becomes tapped. Silent Arbiter. So, like, before we get our commander out or before we get some of the high CMC stuff out, we're going to be kind of vulnerable of getting attacked, because this is a deck that basically, it might take a little bit for it to show its power level, but once it does, people are scared, so they don't really like that. So with Silent Arbiter, this is also really cool because we have Kozilek, so Kozilek has Menace, so with Silent Arbiter out, they basically just can't block it, because only one creature can block each combat, and one creature is not enough to block Kozilek. So there's some cool stuff in here, but like I said, the main thing would be that we need time to build up. So Silent Arbiter, making sure we only get attacked by one creature. I mean, that's the thing. And we're only normally wanting to swing with one big creature. If we get more than one out, that's great. But most of the time, it's just going to be one, maybe two. So we're not making like an army of like Eldrazi. I mean, that'd be the goal, but that would take some time. Solemn Simulacrum, not a card I play in a ton of decks, but in this one, it's good. We don't do any flicker stuff like this. Like, we don't run a Conjurer's Closet in here, but I guess that's something I could contemplate running if I felt like I had enough ETB stuff, but I do an artifact flicker deck. That's another deck I have. That's a deck I need to rebuild, but I guess it's because that's a separate strategy I'm already doing. I kind of wanted this deck to be different. Kadoltha Forge Master, sack 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact put on the battlefield. We have some really powerful artifacts in this deck. Like I said, this is a way to sack artifacts, so Solemn Simulacrum has a death trigger that we could get off of that. The Scrap Trawler I showed you earlier, this is a way to sack some artifacts. Then if we had Scrap Trawler in the field, we would get something back. So, yeah, Forge Master, like I said, we got one really powerful artifact, and then we have a few other ones that would be really good targets for that. Okay, Reality Smasher. I like the stat line. A 5 mana for 5/5 has Trample Haste, and then if it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, counter it unless they discard a card. I just like the value there. I think it's one of the only Eldrazi that actually has haste, so that's kind of cool. Walker of the Waste. So you probably asked earlier, well, why aren't you running more non-basic lands? Well, this is one of the reasons. Walker of the Waste, 4/4 with Trample for 5 mana, gets +1/+1 for each land you control named Waste. Well, that's all of our lands. So, like I played last night with my buddies. That thing, when I played it on, I don't think it was turn 5, but I played it a little later on. It was a 16/16 Trample. It's pretty nice. Conduit of Ruin. This is the last card I was waiting for. I ordered it, but the jackass that I ordered from just never shipped it. And then because of TCG players like policy, you're not allowed to like make a complaint about where your card's at until like a full month has passed by, which is ridiculous. So I already know the guy's not shipping the card, so I just got to wait a few more days. But anyway, I just went and picked this up from my local game shop. I got the foil, but so when you cast it, you search the library for a colorless creature with converted mana 7 or greater. That's good. Put it on top of your library. The real thing is the first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. Any way that we can reduce the cost of Kozilek, that's what we want. So I'm all about reduction of cost. Endbringer. Untap it during each other player's untap step, and then you can tap him, deal damage to target creature or player, or target creature can't attack or block this turn, but you have to pay a colorless mana for that. Or you can pay 2 colorless tap to draw a card. All those effects are good, and they're all versatile. I can't tell you one's better than any of the other ones. I mean, the one that doesn't cost us mana is great, because we might be able to get rid of some problematic 1 toughness creatures our opponents have without paying mana. But the cool thing is, if we do have mana that we have available that we couldn't cast anything with, it's cool that we have a way to like use that. Okay, Oblivion Sower. So we have there's a few cards in here that actually exile like our opponent's stuff. So it's like, for instance, like Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. Whenever he attacks, they have to exile the top 20 cards of their library. So cards like this are nice. When you cast it, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of his or her library. Then you may put any number of lands the player owns from exile onto the battlefield under your control. So there's some cool synergies there. Ulamog's Despoiler. So once again, you just saw that card exiles stuff. This one, when it enters the battlefield, put 2 cards your opponent owns from exile into their owner's graveyards. If you do, this thing gets 4+1/+1 counters on it. So with just having our opponents have some exiled cards, this thing can become a 9/9 for 6 mana. I really like that. It wouldn't be a colorless deck for me without a Wormcoil Engine. As the professor from Tulane Community College says, this is kind of like the honorary 6th Titan. It's a 6 mana, 6/6 Death Touch Lifelinker. Last night when I was playing, this was a card that I got revealed when I did my Eldrazi Mimic, so it was kind of cool that I was able to get a 6/6 Lifelinker with Death Touch for, like I said, I'll tell you exactly how I did it. The card's coming up here in a second. So yeah, this thing, if it dies, basically, you make a 3. It basically splits and becomes a 3/3 with Death Touch and a 3/3 with Lifelink. So it becomes 2 different creatures, just half the stat line, but 1 Death Touch, 1 Lifelink. So Wormcoil is a great card, love it, and I love that artwork. Bane of Balaged. It doesn't officially have Annihilator because the cards get exiled instead of just sacked to the graveyard. But yeah, whenever it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls, which is nice. This is the card that I was able to turn my Eldrazi Mimic into Wormcoil Engine. Deceiver of Form. So the stat line's really good for 7 mana. It's an 8/8. At the beginning of combat on your turn, reveal the top card of your library. If a creature card is revealed this way, you can have creatures you control other than this card become copies of it until the turn. Now, I normally don't like copies. What I'm saying is I don't like making like a token copy of something. That bothers me. But something like like morphing and becoming something else for the turn, I'm fine with that. So, like I said, my Eldrazi Mimic, which is like a 2/1, became a 6/6 Death Touch Lifelinker because I had a Wormcoil Engine on the top of my library, which was nice. So, the cool thing you can do, and it's what my opponents were afraid of last night, was if you have like a card on the top of your library that has Annihilator, then you could have something really small get Annihilator, which obviously is great. Breaker of Armies. I just like the stat line. It's a 10/8. All creatures able to block Breaker of Armies do so. Like I said, normally for us, don't really care. At the point that that's attacking, I mean, it's not going to be the scariest thing on our board, most likely. Eldrazi Devastator, 8/9 with Trample. That's just a good stat line, and it's an Eldrazi. Ulamog's Crusher, Annihilator 2, an 8/8 for 8 mana. Attacks each turn of Fable. That's fine with us. Artisan of Kozilek. When you cast it, you can return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Has Annihilator 2, a 10/9 for 9 mana. We like that. Void Winnower. I got this out last night, and then my opponent, he did a... What's the card? Red card that does like 13 damage. I can't think of it, but it does 13 damage to every creature on the board. Anyway, he hit me with that, but your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana cost, then your opponents can't block creatures with even converted mana cost. Void Winnower is definitely a problem, and it's one of the best colorless cards that they've ever made. Desolation Twin. When you cast it, you basically make a copy of itself. So that's good for 10 mana. Kozilek Butcher Truth. So a lot of the Eldrazi's have become cheaper. Recently, they got reprinted in Double Masters 2022. So it made this deck a little bit more affordable to try to pick it back up and get the pieces together. I will say this. They just announced that later on this year, they're going to do like an Eldrazi structure deck. I think it's for Commander Masters. So I'm really looking forward to that because I'm not going to lie, there's probably like 3 or 4 cards in this deck that I'm like, yeah, that could go, where I wouldn't have a problem parting with them. Some of them are like not say fan favorites. Some of them are just personal favorites of mine, but I'm looking forward to like new support for colorless and for Eldrazi. That'll be nice. So when this guy is a 10 mana for 12, it's a 12/12 for 10 mana. When you cast it, draw 4 cards. That's even if it gets countered, you still get the draw 4. And then it has Annihilator 4, which is amazing. And then the effect you got to always remember is if this thing hits the graveyard from anywhere, it doesn't matter. You got to shuffle your whole graveyard into your library. So it just kind of prevents you from being able to resurrect him, and I get it, but also prevents you from decking out, which is nice. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. When you attack, your defending player exiles the top 20 cards of the library. When you cast it, you get to exile 2 target permanents, and it also has indestructible. Once again, even if they counter this, the exile effect still happens. Pathrazer of Ulamog, it's Annihilator 3, 9/9 for 11 mana. Can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. We like that. Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, 10/10 indestructible Annihilator 4 when you cast it, destroy target permanent. And then it's the same thing as the Kozilek Butcher of Truth. If it hits the graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle your whole graveyard into your library. And then, yeah, It That Betrays. That's the last Eldrazi we have in here. Annihilator 2, 11/11. When an opponent sacks a non-token permanent, put that card on the battlefield under your control. This can become nuts. And It That Betrays is probably my favorite, aside from the commander, it's probably my favorite Eldrazi. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so that's it for the creatures. Let's go to the artifacts. Okay, we got Aether Vial. So, just a way for us to possibly cheat out creatures. Now, I will say this, like, you might be able to do this on curve and get out, like, 2, maybe even 3 creatures. But after a certain point, you're just not going to have the right CMCs to get Aether Vial to get going. But it really helps you early on. It's a great 1-drop. It's a great turn 1 play. Pyxis of Pandemonium. So you tap it, exile the top card of each player's library face down, and you can pay 7, tap, sack this thing, and then each player turns face up all the cards they exiled with this card and puts them on the battlefield. Here's the thing. We only play 4 cards in this deck that are not permanents. So basically, we're going to get the most use out of this, I would think. And we have a lot of heavy hitters in this deck. A lot of other people, have low CMC stuff, so it should be good for us. Wayfarer's Bauble. I don't run this in any other deck, but because we desperately need ramp in this deck, I like the value here. Like, it's not bad. Pay 1 to play this card, and then the next turn you pay 2, tap it, sack, and then ramp by 1, which is good. Pyre of Heroes, because we mostly are just playing an Eldrazi tribal deck for the most part, we can pay 2, tap, sack a creature, and then basically do a Neoform where we go grab something with 1 CMC more than that card from our library and put it on the battlefield. So we have a lot of good options with that. Cloud Key. When it enters the battlefield, you choose artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, or sorcery, and then spells of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. Spells you cast of the chosen type. So most of the time, I'm picking creature. You could pick artifact, but most of the time I'm picking creature just because I want any card I can get that's going to reduce the cost of my Kozilek. Kulfner's Urn. This is a card I haven't really seen. I don't see this on like EDH Rec for like Kozilek, but I think this is great. Whenever a creature with toughness 4 greater is put into your graveyard from play, remove it from the game. Okay, so you exile stuff, like big stuff that were to leave the battlefield. At the end of turn, if 3 or more cards have been removed from the game with Kulfner's Urn, sack it, and then you return to the battlefield. I like that a lot. Crawl Space, this card got reprinted. Really happy about that. And Dominaria Remastered to lower the price. No more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. Like I said, any way that we can stop our opponents from like killing us before we get set up with our big creatures would be nice. Culling Scales, this is more like a fan favorite. I say fan favorite, a personal favorite of mine. Is it all that great? No, not really. I probably could take this out. At the beginning of your upkeep, destroy target non-land permanent with the lowest CMC among non-land permanents in play. So I didn't get this out last night, but I had my buddy Brendan. He used this deck last night against me, and I think I was using my Ish and Two Heavens as one deck, and I had some Goblin tokens out. And basically, he was kind of forced to blow those up one slow pop at a time, because it only hits during your upkeep. And anyway, yeah, the payoff wasn't all that great, because tokens obviously have a CMC of 0, so I get that. But like I said, in colorless, your options are kind of limited. So, like I said, if you guys have a suggestion for a replacement for that, I'm all ears. Extra Planar Lens, great card. So I love what I do in this deck, and like I said, this is another reason why I love Waste in here. So it has Imprint. Whenever it comes into play, you remove target land you control from the game. So for us, that's going to be a Waste. Okay, whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. So basically, if I remove a Waste, everybody around the board, now if they were to tap a Waste, they get double the mana off that 1 mana that they, or 1 land that they tapped. The problem is, I've never met another person not playing a colorless deck that runs Waste. So for me, all my lands are going to get double the mana, and my opponents won't get anything for just 3. And I'm like, that's great. I don't generally like cards that say, you know, your lands tap for double the mana. 1, in colorless, we're really desperate to get any kind of ramp we can. And 2, this is a cool way where me playing nothing but basics and playing Waste, I get a cool benefit off it. That, like I said, this isn't some card that every colorless deck would splash in and be like, oh my gosh, I run all these non-basics and I get crazy advantage. It's just different. So I like that. Golem Foundry, I was looking for a way for me to get artifact tokens in colorless. And this is one of the ways I found. Like I said, if you guys have a better way, I'm all ears. When you cast an artifact, well, I say I'm all ears. I know cards like Mirror Battlesphere exist. I hate Mirror Battlesphere because my buddy Brennan plays it a lot, and I just get tired of it. So for this card, when I cast an artifact, I put a charge counter on it, and then I can remove 3 charge counters to put a 3/3 golem onto the battlefield. Herald's Horn, we're going to choose Eldrazi with this, make him cost 1 less, and then we might get an additional draw. Semblance Anvil. Okay, so here's the cool thing about Semblance Anvil. I might have already explained this before in another video. When it enters the battlefield, you exile a non-land card from your hand. Spells you cast that share a card type with that exiled card cost 2 less to cast. We have a decent chunk of artifact creatures in this deck. So if we can do Semblance Anvil and exile an artifact creature, not only do our creatures cost 2 less to cast, but because it shares a card type, artifacts also cost 2 less to cast. Now that doesn't like double stack, so like if you have an artifact creature after you play this that you want to cast, it doesn't get double reduced, it just goes down by 2. But that's the goal. But in general, let's say we don't have an artifact creature, I'm going to probably go with creatures just because I want Kozilek to come out quicker. So when in doubt, I do creatures. But artifact creatures is the best thing to exile. Stratascythe, this is a card I might consider taking out. I like it, I don't love it. So when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a land card, exile it, then shuffle your library. Once again, we're going to do a waste because that's all we have. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land on the battlefield with the same name as the exiled card. So once, this is meant to in a regular game, if you were playing white and 2 other opponents were playing white, you probably would get a lot off of a plains. But for us, every land we have, because we're only running 1 color, every land we have is going to be a waste. So let's say I play this and I have 9 wastes. My creature's going to get +9/+9. So I like that. But like I said, I'd get if you guys want to take that out. Urza's Incubator, we choose Eldrazi. Our Eldrazi's cost 2 less to cast. Love that. Boom Pile. So I looked at Ratchet Bomb, but I didn't love that. I like this one. Tap, flip a coin. If you win the flip, destroy all non-land permanents. The reason I like this is because, I get to choose when this is happening, and I don't have to pay any extra mana into it. So if I'm starting to get behind, or I'm I really need to wipe the board. Yes, it comes down to a coin flip, and I get that. But I like it because, like I said, if I'm low on mana or if I had to do a few other things, I like that I'm not because I used to have Perilous Vault in here, and then I was Perilous Vault, I got to pay a certain amount to cast it, and then I got to save up the mana, I think 5, to tap it, then to do its effect, and then exile everything, including Perilous Vault. And I'm well, what if I don't want my stuff exiled? What if I want it in the graveyard to possibly get back with Scrap Trawler or something like that? I'm I don't want my stuff exiled. So Perilous Vault could go in here, but like I said, I liked Boom Pile. Maybe in a couple months I might try to switch it back, but for now I like that. Clock of Omens. So I don't have Unwinding Clock in here, but I want one. It costs a little bit, but I might try to get one. But for Clock of Omens, I like this. Tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to untap target artifact. We got some good synergies with that, so I like that, and I like that artwork. Lux Cannon, so this is a card that synergizes with Clock of Omens. Tap, put a charge counter on it, and then you can tap, remove 3 charge counters from it to destroy target permanent. Like I said, now that I'm talking about it, I probably should just say screw it and just fork over the money for an Unwinding Clock just to kind of complete this deck and make it a little bit better. Quicksilver Amulet, you pay 4, tap, put a creature from your hand on the battlefield. This is not a cast, but we can get a lot of our bigger Eldrazi out with that. Citanial Flute, this is a card I really like. So you pay 5, and then you can pay X, tap it, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, reveal it, put it into your hand. The reason why I like this card is because, okay, you play it for 5, and I get that's a big cost. But then from then on out, any extra mana that you have, because that happens a lot, where you just don't have something to play, you're waiting to play your commander or whatever, you can tap this, and then just pay some mana and go grab a creature that you're cool, this will be something I can play. It just kind of sets you up for next turn, or it gives you more fodder for Kozilek, honestly, once you have him out. So I like that. Cryptic Gateway. This is a card that got reprinted, Dominaria Remastered, and I think we can get some good use out of it in this deck because it is pretty much tribal. So you can tap 2 untapped creatures you control, put a creature from your hand that shares a creature type with each creature tapped this way on the battlefield. So basically, if we have two Eldrazi's on the battlefield, we can tap two of them and then just cheat out an Eldrazi from our hand, which I like. Forsaken Monument, colorless creatures get +2/+2, which is everything we have. And then whenever you tap a permanent for a colorless mana, add an additional, which, like I said, all our wastes are tapping for a colorless mana, so that's good. When you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life, a little bit of life gain there, I like that, because like I said, everything's colorless in here. Horizon Stone, if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead. So I read the rules, and from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that basically, like, if I had to pass a whole turn where I'm like, I don't have anything to do, I just don't, whatever. If I had Horizon Stone out, like let's say I had 9 mana face up, instead of that 9 mana going away at the end of turn, it just becomes colorless in my mana pool, and then I can just stockpile it, which is really awesome. Mind's Eye, whenever an opponent draws a card, you may pay 1. If you do draw a card, this is really helpful. Obviously, drawing cards is great, but it allows us to, if we were to normally waste mana, I normally play with 2 other friends. Like I said, ideally you do want a 4-player game, but normally for me and my buddies, we can only get 3. So even with this, with 2 other opponents, I can at least get an additional 2 draws every go around by just saving 2 mana up. So like that. Gate to the Aether. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player reveals the top card of their library. If it's an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land, that player can put it into play. Obviously, I get that other people can put in problematic things, but that's the thing is, like I said, all but 4 cards in our whole deck are going to be able to get cheated out with Gate to the Aether. So chances are we're going to get that. They might run, some instant sorceries, planeswalkers, stuff like that, where it doesn't work for them. And then on top of it, like I said, we got some heavy hitters in this deck, so I feel like Gate to the Aether really works to our advantage. Planar Bridge, for 6 mana, you can pay 8, tap it, and then put any permanent you want from your library onto the battlefield. We have some really good stuff. Ward of Bones. This is one of my favorite artifacts in this deck. Each opponent who controls more creatures than you can't play creature cards. The same is true for artifacts, enchantments, and lands. So we don't run any enchantments in this deck. So basically, if I play Ward of Bones and someone has, if someone has no enchantments, they can't even play 1 because that would make it that they have more than me. So exactly. Like each opponent. Oh, sorry. If they were to play, they have to control more than me, and then from then on they can't do any more. So I guess if we're at 0, they're allowed to play 1, and then after that they can't play anymore. But creatures, like I said, we're not always going to have a ton of creatures out there. Lands, we're not going to ramp up like crazy most of the time. And then artifacts, like I said, there's artifacts decks that just go crazy. And I played this against my buddy one time. He was running his artifact deck, and he was like, "Man, screw that card." He's like, "I can't do anything." I'm like, "All right, sorry, bro." But yeah, Ward of Bones is great. And then the last artifact for us is a new card, or newish, Portal to Phyrexia. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacks 3 creatures, which is great. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian. We don't really care about that. But yeah, we could cheat this out a few ways with that Planar Bridge or with Kadoltha Forgemaster. We could get this out. Puts in a lot of work. It's just really great. I just need one more copy of this for my artifact deck. I'll put this in here. But yeah, it's a cool looking card. Got the foil. Really happy with it. Okay, so we only have 4 more cards to go. Next, we're going to go to the instance. So Spatial Contortion, for 2 mana, target creature gets +3/-3 until end turn. Obviously, you could buff one of your creatures in combat, I guess, to like kill a creature, I guess. But for the most part, I just use this to kill something with toughness 3 or less. I just like it. It's kind of a surprise. Warping Whale, you can choose one. Either exile target creature with power toughness 1 or less, which my buddy that was using this deck did last night, and I kind of forgot this card did that. Counter target sorcery spell, that's normally what I'm doing with this card. And then lastly, you can make a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion that sacks for a colorless mana, but I don't really ever do that. And last instant is Titan's Presence. As additional cost to cast this, reveal a colorless creature from your hand. Exile target creature if its power is less than or equal to the revealed card's power. As you saw, we got some powerful stuff in here, so chances are we'll be just fine. And then the last card in the deck is All Is Dust, which any deck would be incomplete without this, any colorless deck. Each player sacrifices all colored permanents he or she controls. Well, we don't have any of those, so basically this is a complete board wipe that doesn't affect us. So that's great. So a few cards that aren't in here. The Ugin Planeswalkers, don't get me wrong, there's some good ones, and yeah, I'd probably want those, but in general, I'm happy with the build. Like I said, I'm open to a few suggestions. Really, I'm just waiting on that Eldrazi Commander deck that they announced. I'm waiting on that to come out. So anyway, that's it. We're pretty much right at 30 minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. My Kozilek, the Great Distortion deck profile. This deck is a little expensive, just a little bit, But if you make it, it's a hell of a lot of fun, and it's cool that you're restricted to one color. Honestly, colorless. I mean, it is one color, but it's just fun to kind of like see what you can brew. So anyway, yeah, like I said, open to suggestions. Comment below. Let me know what you thought of it. Like, comment, subscribe. Have a good day, guys.